radio at rocketmail.com as we fill in for Bud Hedinger on the 50,000-watt front porch. Coming up, it is Open Mind Monday, and you can feel free to chime in on anything you want. We're going to start talking to you about the Wisconsin situation because it has implications for everyone. It has implications for us in Florida. And what happens in Wisconsin and Indiana and Ohio and all of those labor union-dominated states will impact the rest of the country. Before the break, I was talking about the fact that we can have civil discourse. We can talk about different issues. There's certain things I'm not going to bend on. There's certain things that are solid for me. There's certain values and beliefs that I hold to that I'm not going to change, and I hope the same as you. I hope that's true with you. I hope that you haven't bought into political correctness that says you have to be like everyone else, you have to have the same values as everyone else, and that if there's something that you feel very strongly about, that it's somehow intolerant of you to hold on to that. I disagree. But there are some rules of the game, and one of the rules is civility. I will not tolerate any member of the Tea Party equating President Barack Obama, who I did not vote for. Don't think I'm going to vote for him again. As a matter of fact, it's 99.9% that I'm not going to. But he is not Adolf Hitler. Do I disagree with his policies? Many of them, most of them, a lot of them. But that is absolutely ridiculous and offensive to equate him with one of the great evils of the world. Likewise, when I see these labor unions and these activists waving signs around that say, you know, Scott Walker is Adolf Hitler or wearing Hitler mustaches, it's the same principle. And what bothers me is I have the intellectual honesty to say Barack Obama is not Adolf Hitler. And don't insult the presidency of the United States by making that absurd claim. But why can't the liberals say, you know what, it's absurd. We should not be throwing the name Adolf Hitler or any other evildoer around. If you don't like what Scott Walker is doing, you have the right to protest. Some people have called the group in Wisconsin a mob and thugs. I don't think that's necessarily fair, but I do think that if they stop acting with decency and decorum, you know, right now they've kind of taken over the Capitol building and they can't even get in to clean the place. I think that's on the verge of being out of order, but it's still not a mob. These people have the right to protest. They have the right to hold their signs, just like the Tea Party does. But just like we call out members of the Tea Party when they go overboard and when they are extreme, then the unions, the media, they need to call out those people who are saying Scott Walker is like Adolf Hitler. Is that fair? I mean, I think it is. All right. But you can have your say, 407-916-5400, 407-916-5400, the 50,000-watt front porch. I'm Lynn Miller sitting in for Bud Hedinger. It is 6:22, time for a look at traffic. All right, it is currently 65 degrees and mostly dark outside, but it did have a pretty sliver of a moon as I drove in this morning. Going to be high today of about 87, partly cloudy skies. Tonight, a low of about 65 with some scattered showers tomorrow and a high of about 76. So we're heading into what I call Chamber of Commerce days. It's going to be a really nice day in Central Florida. 407-916-5400 if you would like to chime in a little bit later on. We're going to have It's Open Mind Monday, and you're able to call in and talk about anything, and I will try to keep an open mind, as I always do and as Bud does. You know, we don't get upset and angry here. This is a dialogue and it's a conversation. But I expect the dialogue to be both ways, and I expect the conversation and the decorum to be both ways. And sometimes in political debate and discourse, I don't see that. I was interviewing a local politician recently, and he made a comment that it was time for all of us to ratchet down the rhetoric. And he didn't blame necessarily talk radio for there to be, you know, high-spirited and high-stakes discussions. But when I pressed him a little bit, I said, are you talking about talk radio, and are you talking about conservatives? And he backed up and he said, no, I'm not talking necessarily about talk radio, and I'm not necessarily talking about conservatives. But he said everyone in the political debate and the political discourse has to be able to put aside some of the high emotion and the high energy and be able to discuss the issues based on policy and procedure, and not get into the name calling and not get into all of the vitriol that we see. And I thought his point was well taken, and this happens to be a conservative politician. It was an off-the-record comment I was interviewing, but it was off the record, so I'm not going to say who it was. But he was right. But if we as the conservatives are going to make the first move to have good discussions and to be, less vitriolic, then I want to see some concessions on the other side. And as we talk about this labor dispute, and as we talk about people who are from the SEIU and the Service Workers Union and the various workers' party people, I think that they also have to take a page from the playbook of civility. And I'm not interested in having talk radio, whether it's Rush Limbaugh or Glenn Beck or Bud Hettinger or Lynn Miller or any of the local hosts. It is not only our responsibility to see that things are discussed civilly. There also has to be some give and take from the other side, and I just don't see anybody willing to do that. Has the news media called into account anybody that you've seen that has carried one of those signs that said Scott Miller is like Adolf Hitler? Have you seen MSNBC or CNN or anybody say, listen, this is offensive, this shouldn't be, the union should call those people and tell them to take down the sign, change the sign? Have you seen that? No, you haven't. And that's part of the problem. I will tell you, if that was a Tea Party rally, you would have had MSNBC doing a live remote with nothing but that sign plastered on their screen, so all 10 of their viewers, maybe it's only 5, all 5 of their viewers could see it. But they would be there. That they would be making a huge deal out of this if it was a Tea Party member. The SEIU, they carry the same signs. Where's the outrage? There isn't any. There isn't any. And friends, that's a problem, because that tells me that the mainstream news media is not being fair. It's not being balanced. They're not really reporting. Now, if you've heard MSNBC or CNN or any of the other people out there, CBS, ABC, whatever, if you've heard them call those people on the carpet, then let me know, because I haven't seen it. And I don't monitor them 24/7, but I'll bet you haven't, because I bet you they haven't. But this was a Tea Party rally, and they would be there in force, in full offense. Because being offended is very easy for the mainstream media. Everything offends them if it's a conservative doing it. Now, a liberal does the same thing, and it's not so bad. We can look the other way. But if it's a conservative, if it's a member of the Tea Party, for heaven's sakes, if it's a member of the right-wing radical Republican brigade, if you're a talk radio person, if you listen to talk radio, then you're automatically guilty of whatever sin they think you are. It needs to stop. There needs to be give and take, and there needs to be civility. Now, and that, by the way, doesn't mean that you have to back off of your held beliefs. It doesn't mean that at all. It means that you stick to your guns, but you do it civilly. I disagree with Barack Obama on policy issues. The fact that he is an African American is the one thing I actually like. I am glad we have elected an African American. Race shouldn't matter, but it does. So I am glad that we have finally crossed that barrier and we have an African American president. But that's about the only thing I can think of right now that I am happy about. I think he has mishandled Libya. I think he is mishandling the Middle East. I think he is not supporting the people like Hosni Mubarak, who we should have supported, even though he was a dictator. And yes, he is certainly has not been good for the Egyptian people. He has been good for the status quo, and he's been good for the state of Israel, and I think we treated him very shabbily. If the Egyptian people decide it's time for a change, then that is their business, and we need to support them in that. But we could have been a little bit more supportive of Mubarak, and instead we kind of threw him under the bus. Muammar Gaddafi, a bad man from start to finish. Remember, Ronald Reagan bombed his palace years ago. But the whole situation, in my view, has not been handled well at all. But I'm going to debate him and discuss this based on policy, not based on the fact that I don't like him or the fact that he's a liberal Democrat. I can discuss liberal policies that he holds that I think are anti-American free enterprise, that I think will end up hurting the middle class, all classes of people. I think he's walked away from some of the basic fundamental things that this country was founded on, and I find that very disturbing. I think that Barack Obama has little experience. Now, clearly, nobody is prepared for the office of the presidency. I don't care who you are. I don't care how much I like you or if I've supported you and voted for you. There is no job like this. So to say that he is, wasn't qualified, no one is really qualified. But to say that he lacked real important experience, I think is a valid point. He came to this job extremely green. Governors, by and large, are much more qualified because they've had some executive level experience. Barack Obama had nothing. But that doesn't have anything to do with who he is. It doesn't have anything to do with his race. It doesn't have anything to do with his ethnicity. It has to do with his on-the-job training, and he didn't have enough. But I can debate him and discuss that on a policy level without saying anything untoward about him personally. I think I'd probably like to sit down and have some tea or coffee with him. I think he's probably a nice guy. But as a president, I find him sorely lacking. But I will judge him based on his credentials or lack thereof. All right, it's 6:31, a little over time for a break. We'll take a quick one when we return. Bud Hedinger Live continues. Lynn Miller sitting in for the Bud man who's a little under the weather. It is 6:31.
This is Bud with a few heartfelt thoughts about your heart and the amazing heart scan from Dr. Ken Cronhouse of Lake Cardiology that saved my life and has saved the lives of countless folks like you. Dr. Ken was the first doctor in Central Florida to have the CT coronary angiography breakthrough, the medical marvel he calls the Bud scan in my honor. I call him the best in the business, and I'm not alone. Lake Cardiology Home of Dr. Cronhouse is the first and only medical facility in all of Central Florida accredited for CT scanning of the heart by iCapital. That's the commission that sets the standard for quality care in heart CT scanning. No other doctor and no other practice or hospital in the area has been so honored. Only my doctor, Ken Cronhouse of Lake Cardiology. It's your heart, it's your life. Please call Lake Cardiology, home of Dr. Cronhouse, and ask if the Bud scan could be right for you. I'm living proof this one call could save your life. Call today, 352-735-1400. Learn more at 540WFNA.com. Keyword Bud scan. What can you do with a Sprinter van? I use my Sprinter van as a borrowing vehicle for my medical supply company. It gets over twice the fuel mileage as my last van. My Sprinter van is a workshop and a warehouse for my air conditioning business. I'm 6'2", but there's plenty of room to stand up back there.
My Sprinter van gives me the space I need to cover the pets for my mobile dog grooming business.
How could your business use a Sprinter van? Explore your options. Click on the Sprinter banner at OrlandoFreightliner.com or visit OrlandoSprinter.com. Ford Service presents My Flow, talking about getting to work. No, wrong again. Well, of course I am. Why don't you just tell us what you're talking about? I'm talking about getting the works. Ah, yes, the works. At your Ford dealer. Right, that works. You know what's really good about it? No, Mike, tell me. Well, if you're like me, you're not an automotive service expert. So it's nice to know that the people who are experts will not only change your oil and rotate your tires, but also check just about everything else on your car. I like that. Well, I work with Mike. The works is a motor prep freelance and authentic blend, oil and filter change, tire rotation, battery test, brake inspection, check of belts and hoses, fluid top over more.
Good morning, Mike. Good, how are you? Did you get my email that you'll be talking with Lynn? Okay, cool. We'll be ready in about 2 minutes here. We're running a little late.
See if the works for
Thanks,
you.
sorry.
Which it probably will. Up to 5 quarts oil, taxes, diesel, and disposal fees extra. See participating dealership or visit FordOwner.com for rebate details through 3/31/11.
Want to save money on your homeowner's insurance? Florida Insurance Specialist is the key. Go to their website, ChallengeMyRate.com. That's ChallengeMyRate.com. You'll know how much they can save you in minutes. It's Florida Insurance Specialist at ChallengeMyRate.com.
Bud Hedinger Live continues with news from the Fox Orlando News Center on 540 WFLA.
It's 6:30. I'm Daryl Moody, 540 WFLA News. Two of Discovery's astronauts will conduct the first of two planned spacewalks later today at the International Space Station. Stephen Bowen and Alvin Drew will remove a broken ammonia pump from the orbiting outpost and install an extension power cable that will power a new module being delivered by Discovery's crew. Opposition groups are organizing in western Libya, even naming a leader for an interim government if Muammar Gaddafi's regime